"You got fat," her ex mocked her, unaware she was pregnant with the richest CEO's son. "You got fat." Her ex mocked her in public, laughing as phones came out and the insult went viral. What no one knew was that she wasn't gaining weight. She was hiding a pregnancy. And not just any pregnancy, she was carrying the child of the youngest, richest CEO in the country. She walked away from his dangerous world to protect her baby. But now the cruelty has followed her home. When the powerful father sees the video, he recognizes her instantly and realizes his child is already in the spotlight he tried to shield them from. Enemies are watching, lies are spreading, and stepping forward could cost him everything. So will he stay silent to protect his empire, or step into the fire to protect his family? When the world turns cruel, what matters more, power or love? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The first rays of sunlight crept through the thin curtains of Alana Brooks's bedroom window. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the gentle light that painted her walls in soft amber hues. The familiar wave of morning sickness made her pause before sitting up, and she took several deep breaths to steady herself. "Another day, another blessing," she whispered, her grandmother's favorite saying coming naturally to her lips. Alana's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, still flat enough that no one would notice, but she knew the precious life growing within. 3 months of keeping this secret had taught her new levels of strength she didn't know she possessed. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet as she made her way to the bathroom of her small apartment. The mirror reflected her tired but determined face, and she studied her reflection carefully, making sure nothing in her appearance would give away her condition. Dark circles under her eyes could be covered with makeup, but the worry lines around her mouth were harder to hide. "We're going to be okay," she murmured, both to herself and her unborn child. The morning routine had become a quiet ritual of preparation and prayer. In her bedroom, Alana pulled out several outfits from her modest closet, laying them carefully on her neatly made bed. She needed to look professional for the job fair, but her regular work clothes were starting to feel snug in uncomfortable ways. After careful consideration, she chose a flowing navy blue blouse that draped loosely over her midsection, and a pair of black slacks with an elastic waist. The smell of toast made her stomach turn, but Alana knew she needed to eat something. She forced down small bites while reviewing the folder containing her resumes and certificates. Each document represented years of hard work and determination, yet here she was, starting over again. The morning sun climbed higher as Alana moved around her apartment, gathering what she needed for the day. Her movements were deliberate and careful, each step measured as if she were carrying something fragile, which in truth she was. The job fair wouldn't start until 9 o'clock, but Alana planned to arrive early. Being prompt had been another of her grandmother's lessons, one of many that seemed more important now than ever. She checked her appearance one final time in the hallway mirror, adjusting her blouse and smoothing her hair. Before reaching for the door, Alana felt the familiar urge to pray. She moved back to her bedside, where a small cross hung on the wall, another inheritance from her grandmother. Lowering herself carefully to her knees, she closed her eyes and clasped her hands together. "Lord," she began softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "please watch over this child. Give me the strength to face whatever comes our way today. Help me find the right path to provide for this little one." Her voice caught slightly. "And please, help me carry this burden with dignity, no matter what people might say or think." The prayer continued, words flowing from her heart about protection, guidance, and hope. When she finally opened her eyes, the room felt lighter somehow, as if the morning sun had chased away some of her fears. Standing up, Alana gathered her purse and folder, checking one last time that she had everything she needed. Her resume copies were neatly organized, her references listed carefully, and her certifications were all in order. These papers represented possibility, the chance for a new start, a better future for her child. The apartment complex was quiet as she locked her door, most of her neighbors still asleep on this Saturday morning. Her sensible shoes made little noise on the concrete walkway as she headed toward her car, an aging Honda that had seen better days but still ran reliably. Each step seemed to echo with purpose, each movement carrying her closer to what she hoped would be an opportunity for change. The morning air was already warm, promising another hot day in Magnolia Ridge. The scent of magnolia blossoms drifted on the breeze, a sweet reminder of the town's namesake and the beauty that could still be found even in difficult times. As Alana settled into her car, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Behind the carefully applied makeup and professional attire, she saw what others couldn't yet see. A mother-to-be, carrying not just a child, but dreams and determination. Her hand returned to her stomach, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Just you and me, little one," she whispered, starting the car. "We're going to make this work. Somehow we're going to make this work." The engine hummed to life, and Alana adjusted her mirrors, ready to face whatever the day might bring. The job fair represented more than just employment opportunities. It was a chance to build a foundation for her child's future. She pulled out of her parking space, her prayers still echoing in her heart, her resolve strengthening with each passing moment. The late morning sun climbed higher over Magnolia Ridge's town square, casting dappled shadows through the oak trees onto the festive scene below. Red and white striped tents dotted the grassy area, their banners fluttering in the warm breeze. The annual job fair had transformed into something closer to a carnival, with local food vendors setting up alongside the recruitment booths. The scent of barbecue and fresh popcorn wafted through the air, mixing with the sweet perfume of magnolia blossoms. Alana Brooks kept to the outer edges of the gathering, her resume folder clutched close to her chest like a shield. She'd already visited 3 promising booths, the hospital's HR department, the new grocery store chain, and the community college's administrative office. Each interaction had been professional and promising, but the growing crowd made her increasingly uneasy. The morning sickness that had woken her at dawn still lingered, making the strong food smells almost overwhelming. She paused in the shade of a massive oak tree, taking slow, deep breaths. The rough bark pressed against her shoulder blade through her loose navy blouse as she leaned back slightly, offering silent thanks that the material fell gracefully over her small bump. 3 months wasn't showing much yet, but she felt like everyone could see right through her careful wardrobe choices. The crowd around her swelled as more townspeople arrived, treating the job fair more like a social event than a professional opportunity. Children darted between the booths, their laughter mixing with the upbeat music playing from speakers near the central pavilion. Alana checked her watch, just 2 more booths to visit, and then she could head home to the quiet sanctuary of her apartment. "Well, well, well, look who we have here." The voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife, and Alana's whole body went rigid. She knew that voice, had hoped never to hear it again. Miles Turner's words carried across the square, loud enough to draw attention from nearby clusters of people. Slowly, Alana turned. There he was, 20 feet away, wearing that same smirk she remembered all too well. His button-down shirt was wrinkled, and his eyes had that glassy look she recognized from their worst fights. He'd been drinking, even this early in the day. "Didn't expect to see you out in public," Miles continued, his voice getting louder with each word. He swayed slightly as he took a few steps closer. "Especially not looking like that." Damn, girl, you got fat. The words echoed across the suddenly quiet space around them. Alana felt her cheeks burn as heads turned in their direction. Her fingers tightened on her resume folder until the edges crumpled. She could hear the murmurs starting, see the phones being raised to capture the moment. Social media would be buzzing. Within minutes, the nausea she'd been fighting all morning rose up again, stronger now. But Alana Brooks had learned long ago that dignity wasn't about what other people did to you. It was about how you carried yourself through it. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Hold your head high, baby. Your worth isn't in their hands. Somewhere in the crowd, someone snickered. Another person whispered loudly, "Isn't that Miles Turner's ex?" The sound of recordings being started on phones clicked around her like insects. Miles stood there, chest puffed out, clearly pleased with the attention he'd drawn. His eyes darted around the crowd, feeding off their reaction. "What's wrong?" he taunted. "No comeback? You used to have plenty to say when you were leaving me." The pregnancy hormones made her want to cry. The humiliation made her want to scream. The old anger at his cruelty made her want to tell everyone exactly why she'd left him. But Alana did none of these things. Instead, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. The motion was small, but deliberate, a quiet declaration of dignity that felt like shouting. Without a word, she turned away from Miles and his audience. Her steps were measured and steady as she walked away, even as laughter and whispers followed in her wake. Her shoulders stayed back, her head high, though her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. The resume folder was a crumpled mess in her trembling hands, but she didn't break her stride. The crowd parted slightly as she passed, some people looking away in embarrassment, others openly staring and whispering behind their hands. She could still hear Miles's voice behind her, trying to provoke another reaction, but his words became indistinct as she put distance between them. Each step felt like moving through molasses, but she kept going, one foot in front of the other. The weight of stairs pressed against her back, and phones continued to record her retreat. But Alana, focused on the sidewalk ahead, counting her steps, controlling her breathing. The old Alana might have run. The old Alana might have crumbled under the weight of such public humiliation. But she wasn't just protecting herself anymore. Her hand brushed briefly across her abdomen as she walked, drawing strength from the tiny life growing within. This Alana, the mother Alana, would show her child what real dignity looked like, even if no one else could see it yet. The late afternoon sun filtered through the windshield of Alana's modest Honda Civic, but she barely noticed its warmth. Her hands trembled against the steering wheel as she sat in the far corner of the town square parking lot, trying desperately to catch her breath. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks, dropping onto her loose cotton blouse. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered, her voice breaking. The air in the car felt thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe. She fumbled with the window controls, letting in a rush of fresh air that carried the distant sounds of the continuing job fair, sounds that now seemed to mock her. Each inhale was a struggle, each exhale shaky. Alana closed her eyes, focusing on steadying her breathing the way her mama had taught her years ago. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and steady. But Miles's voice kept echoing in her head, that cruel laugh spreading through the crowd like wildfire. She opened her eyes and caught a glimpse of herself in the rearview mirror. Her dark eyes were red-rimmed, mascara slightly smudged beneath them. With trembling fingers, she wiped carefully at the streaks on her cheeks, trying to restore some dignity to her reflection. "This too shall pass," she murmured, words her grandmother had repeated like a mantra through every hardship. But knowing something would pass didn't make the present moment hurt any less. The drive home seemed endless, though it was only 15 minutes. Alana kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, imagining that every driver who passed could somehow see her shame written across her face. The familiar streets of Magnolia Ridge, usually so comforting with their oak-lined sidewalks and neat front porches, felt different now, as if the whole town had witnessed her humiliation. Finally pulling into her apartment complex's parking lot, Alana hurried inside, grateful for the empty walkway to her unit. The moment she closed her door, her phone buzzed. She'd managed to ignore it during the drive, but now the notifications seemed relentless. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone. 23 messages, 5 missed calls. Her heart sank as she opened the first text from her friend Jasmine. "Girl, you need to see this. Someone posted that mess at the job fair. It's all over Facebook." Another buzz. Another friend. "You okay? This video's going around?" Alana's stomach churned as she opened the link in Jasmine's message. There it was, her humiliation preserved in high definition. The phone speaker carried Miles's taunting voice into her quiet living room, followed by the ripple of laughter from the crowd. The camera followed her as she walked away, catching her stiff shoulders and rigid spine, while comments scrolled past below the video. She only watched it once. That was enough. With deliberate movements, she turned off her phone completely, setting it face down on her small kitchen counter. The silence in her apartment felt like a blessing after the constant buzzing. Alana moved through her evening routine mechanically, changing into comfortable clothes, heating up leftover soup, though she could barely swallow a spoonful. The sun began to set outside her window, painting the sky in soft pinks and purples that seemed at odds with the heaviness in her heart. As darkness settled over Magnolia Ridge, she sat on the edge of her bed, the springs creaking softly beneath her. Both hands came to rest on her stomach, still flat enough that most wouldn't notice, but she could feel the slight firmness there, the precious secret she carried. "I'm so sorry, little one," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "But I promise you this. We won't let their cruelty define us. You're going to grow up knowing you're loved, knowing your worth isn't in what others say about you." Her fingers traced small circles over her belly as she continued. "You're going to know that strength isn't about fighting back or being loud. Sometimes it's about walking away with your head held high. Sometimes it's about choosing dignity over drama." The night air carried the soft chirping of crickets through her partially open window. A car passed on the street below, its headlights briefly illuminating her walls before moving on. In this quiet moment, Alana felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders, not just for herself now, but for this tiny life depending on her. She slipped from the bed onto her knees, clasping, her hands together as she had done every night since she was a little girl. "Dear Lord," she prayed, her voice barely above a whisper, "protect us both. Give me the strength to rise above the shame they try to put on me. Help me build a life of dignity for this child. And Lord, help me forgive those who seek to tear me down." The crickets continued their evening song as Alana remained kneeling, letting peace gradually replace the day's pain. In the darkness of her bedroom, she felt a small spark of hope return, not because the hurt was gone, but because she knew she wouldn't face tomorrow alone. The morning sun glints off the glass and steel of Chicago's most prestigious business district. On the 57th floor of Reed Enterprises, Caleb Reed sits behind his expansive desk, its polished surface reflecting the early light. His fingers move swiftly across his tablet screen as he reviews the overnight reports that keep his billion-dollar empire running smoothly. 29, Caleb has already mastered the art of efficiency. His crisp white shirt and perfectly knotted tie speak of precision, while his organized desk betrays his need for control. The morning routine is familiar. Market updates, competitor analyses, social media trends. His assistant has flagged several viral videos for review, noting their potential impact on various business interests. Caleb swipes through them mechanically until one thumbnail makes his heart skip a beat. He recognizes the location immediately, Magnolia Ridge's town square, a place he'd once known well. The video plays, and his breath catches in his throat. Alana, even from across a crowded square, her presence strikes him with the same force it did 3 years ago. She moves with that same quiet grace, head held high despite clearly trying to avoid attention. Her loose-fitting blouse catches the southern breeze, and something about the way she carries herself makes his trained eye pause. "Play it again," he murmurs to himself, leaning forward in his leather chair. The cruel voice rings out, some fool Caleb doesn't recognize, and the camera zooms in on Alana's face. The insult echoes across the square, and Caleb's jaw tightens as he watches the crowd's reaction. But it's Alana's response that holds him transfixed. The slight shift of her body, the instinctive way her hand moves to shield her midsection before she catches herself. He's seen that protective gesture before, in countless expectant mothers at company events, in the women who work in his building. His mind races back, calculating months, remembering their last night together. The truth hits him with the force of a physical blow. Caleb pushes back from his desk, standing abruptly. His usual calm fractures as he paces the length of his office, the Chicago skyline a blur beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. "She's pregnant," he whispers, the words hanging heavy in the air-conditioned silence. "My child?" He stops at the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. 3 years ago, he'd made the hardest decision of his life, walking away from Alana to protect her from the dangers that came with his position. Corporate espionage, attempted kidnappings, constant threats. His world was too volatile for someone as genuine as Alana. But now, watching the video loop on his tablet, he sees his choice backfire spectacularly. His child, their child, is already facing public humiliation. The video's view count keeps climbing, comment sections filling with cruel jokes and speculation. Caleb's hands curl into fists. He'd built his empire on strategic thinking, on staying 10 steps ahead of every threat. Yet here was the biggest surprise of his life, playing out on social media for everyone to see. The woman he'd never stopped loving, carrying his child, being mocked in front of the world. He returns to his desk, studying Alana's face in the frozen frame. The quiet dignity in her expression, even in the face of humiliation, reminds him of everything that drew him to her. She hasn't changed, still facing life's cruelties with that same inner strength that first captured his heart. "Mr. Reed." His assistant's voice comes through the intercom. The board is waiting in the conference room. Caleb doesn't respond immediately. His eyes remain fixed on the screen, on Alana's retreating figure. He sees now what his strategic thinking cost him. Not just love, but the chance to protect what matters most. His child will enter a world where their mother faces public ridicule, where social media can turn a cruel moment into endless torment. "Mr. Reed," his assistant prompts again. "Cancel the board meeting," he says finally, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "And get the jet ready. I'm going to Magnolia Ridge." "Sir, the quarterly projections can wait." Caleb cuts in, already shrugging off his suit jacket. "Route any emergencies through my phone. I'll be out of the office indefinitely." He stares once more at Alana's image, at the careful way she holds herself, protecting their unborn child from a world that shows no mercy. The weight of his past decisions settles heavily on his shoulders. He'd thought distance was protection, that silence was strength. Now he sees how wrong he was. His fingers hover over the tablet screen, tracing the outline of Alana's figure. The quiet strength in her bearing reminds him of everything he walked away from, everything he needs to make right. The carefully constructed walls of his controlled world are crumbling, but for the first time in 3 years, Caleb feels like he can finally breathe. The morning sun continues its climb over Chicago's skyline, casting long shadows across Caleb's office. In the distance, his private jet is being prepared, while below, the city pulses with its usual rhythm. But in this moment, Caleb Reed, billionaire CEO, strategic genius, master of control, can only think of a small southern town and the woman who carries his greatest treasure, facing the world's cruelty with nothing but her own dignity as shield. The late afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Caleb Reed's executive suite, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany conference table. He watched his executive team file out after their weekly strategy meeting, their voices fading down the corridor. None of them noticed how distracted he'd been, how the viral video of Alana had shaken his carefully constructed world. When the last footsteps disappeared, Caleb loosened his perfectly knotted tie and walked to the window. Chicago spread out before him, a maze of glass and steel reaching towards the sky. He'd built his tech empire from nothing, climbing to heights that seemed impossible for a kid from the South Side. But success had come with a price. Threats, attempts at corporate espionage, even physical danger. His reflection stared back at him, impeccable in his tailored suit. But beneath that polished exterior, guilt gnawed at his conscience. 6 months ago, he'd convinced himself that pushing Alana away was the right thing to do. It's safer this way, he'd told himself, remembering the break-in attempt at his penthouse, the threatening letters, the paparazzi who never seemed to sleep. Caleb pressed his forehead against the cool glass. "I was wrong," he whispered, the words fogging the window. The memory of their last conversation pierced him like a physical pain. Alana had stood in his office, dignity intact despite her tears, as he explained why they needed to end things. "I understand," she'd said quietly, though her eyes told a different story. "You need to protect what you've built." But he hadn't protected anything that truly mattered. The video played again in his mind, Alana, her face composed despite the public humiliation, one hand instinctively shielding her middle. Their child. The thought hit him like a thunderbolt every time. Walking back to his desk, Caleb picked up his phone and pressed a button. "James," he said when his head of security answered. "I need the jet ready in 2 hours." "Sir." James's voice carried surprise. They had 3 major contracts pending. "Something's come up in Georgia." Caleb's tone left no room for discussion. "I need this handled quietly. No flight plan filed until the last possible moment." "Understood, sir. I'll make the arrangements. Do you need security on the ground?" Caleb paused, considering. "No local team. I don't want to draw attention." He ended the call and stood, walking to the private washroom adjoining his office. The man in the mirror looked tired. Caleb splashed cold water on his face, remembering the first time he met Alana at a charity gala in Atlanta. She'd been volunteering, not a guest, and her genuine warmth had cut through his practiced defenses. They'd talked for hours that night, about dreams and faith and family. She'd made him feel human again, not just a CEO with targets on his back. Returning to his office, Caleb opened his safe and removed a small photo, the only one he'd kept. Alana's smile beamed up at him, caught in a rare, unguarded moment during a weekend away. He'd thought he was protecting her by staying away, protecting his empire by avoiding complications. Instead, he'd left her to face public humiliation alone. The sky outside had begun to darken, the city's lights flickering to life like earthbound stars. Caleb gathered what he needed for the trip, his movements deliberate and focused. The corporate titan who'd built a technology empire worth billions was gone. In his place stood a man who'd finally understood that some things matter more than power and safety. His phone buzzed, James confirming the flight details. In less than 3 hours, he'd be on his way to Georgia, to Alana, to their child. The thought both terrified and strengthened him. He had no idea how she would receive him, if she would even speak to him. But for the first time in months, he felt certain about his path. Standing at the window one last time, Caleb watched the city settle into dusk. The empire he'd built would have to run itself for a while. He had more important things to protect now, a family he'd tried to deny, a love he'd pushed away in the name of security. The time for hiding behind corporate walls and security teams was over. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your car is waiting, Mr. Reed." "Thank you, Claire," he responded, picking up his briefcase. The weight of his decisions, both past and present, settled around his shoulders like a familiar coat. But this time, instead of distance and silence, he chose presence and truth. It was time to face what he'd been running from, not as a CEO, but as a man who had finally learned that true protection meant standing beside those you love, not pushing them away. Sunlight had barely touched the horizon when Alana heard the soft knock at her door. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach as she rose from where she'd been sitting at her small kitchen table, Bible open before her, tea growing cold. The gentle tapping came again, unhurried and patient. Through the peephole she saw Mrs. Wilson from next door, her silver hair neat despite the early hour. Alana opened the door, and the older woman's kind face creased with concern. "Child, I hope I didn't wake you," Mrs. Wilson said softly. "But I thought you should know. There's something you need to see." Alana followed her neighbor down the walkway of their apartment complex. The morning air was heavy with humidity, promising another warm Georgia day. As they rounded the corner to the building's entrance, Alana stopped short. The usually empty entryway table was covered with items: casserole dishes wrapped in foil, fresh flowers in mason jars, cards propped against wicker baskets filled with fruit. A handmade quilt lay folded neatly at the center. "Started before dawn," Mrs. Wilson explained, patting Alana's arm. "Women from all over town, some I recognized from church, others I've never seen before. They've been coming quiet-like, leaving these things for you. Nobody wanting to disturb you, just wanting you to know you're not alone." Tears welled in Alana's eyes as she picked up one of the cards. The handwriting inside was shaky but clear. "You walked with dignity, child. We stand with you." It was signed simply, a grandmother who remembers her own hard days. Mrs. Wilson helped her carry everything inside, setting dishes in the refrigerator and arranging flowers on the windowsill. Neither woman spoke much, but the silence was comfortable, filled with understanding. "The morning service at New Hope starts in an hour," Mrs. Wilson mentioned casually as she smoothed the quilt over the back of Alana's couch. "I could walk with you if you're feeling up to it." Alana hesitated. She hadn't planned to leave her apartment today, still raw from yesterday's viral humiliation. But something about the unexpected kindness of strangers made her want to brave the outside world again. "I'd like that," she whispered. They walked slowly to the church, the morning air growing warmer. New Hope Fellowship wasn't grand, just a white-painted building with worn wooden steps and stained glass windows that had seen better days. But to Alana, it had always felt like sanctuary. Inside, the usual Wednesday morning prayer service was small, mostly older women who'd been meeting this way for decades. As Alana slipped into a back pew, Sister Martha, who'd taught Sunday school since before Alana was born, moved to sit beside her. Then Miss Geneva joined them, her arthritis-curved hands reaching for Alana's. One by one, the women shifted, surrounding her with their presence. The service was simple, familiar hymns sung without accompaniment, prayers offered in voices that had known their own share of hardship and hope. When it came time for personal prayers, Sister Martha stood. "Lord," she began, her voice strong despite her 80 years, "we lift up our daughter here. You saw how she held her head high when meanness came at her. You saw her choose dignity over anger. Now we're asking you to wrap her in your peace, to remind her that she comes from a long line of women who knew how to stand tall in hard times." "Amen," the others murmured, and Alana felt tears sliding down her cheeks again. But these were different from yesterday's tears of shame. These felt like healing. After the service, the women lingered. They didn't press for details or offer unwanted advice. Instead, they shared stories of their own mothers, grandmothers, aunts who'd faced darkness with grace. They spoke of children born in difficult times who grew up to bring joy. Their words wove around Alana like a blanket, warm and protective. Miss Geneva pressed a small leather-bound book into her hands. "My mama's prayer journal," she explained. "She wrote in it every day when she was carrying me, during times much harder than these. I want you to have it now." "I couldn't possibly," Alana began, but the older woman shook her head. "You can, and you will. Some things need to be passed along." As the morning stretched toward noon, Alana began her walk home. The quilt of community support wrapped around her heart made the weight she carried feel lighter somehow. She thought about the dishes waiting in her refrigerator, each one representing a woman who'd taken time to cook with care. She thought about the prayer journal in her bag, its pages filled with another mother's hopes and fears from long ago. The air had turned sticky with humidity, but Alana walked slowly, one hand resting on her belly. For the first time since yesterday's public humiliation, she felt something close to peace. The sidewalk ahead was dappled with sunlight, filtering through old oak trees, their branches spreading wide like protective arms. She passed, children playing in front yards, their mothers watching from porches. Several women nodded to her, their eyes kind. Word had spread, not just of the viral video, but of how she'd handled it. In their faces, Alana saw not pity, but respect. Near her apartment complex, Mrs. Rodriguez from the corner house was watering her roses. She paused her gardening to press a small bag of fresh-baked cookies into Alana's hands. No words were exchanged, just a gentle squeeze of fingers and her understanding smile. Alana climbed the stairs to her apartment, the morning's gifts, both physical and spiritual, surrounding her with their reminder that she wasn't walking this path alone. She unlocked her door, stepping into the space now brightened by flowers and warmed by that handmade quilt. The air smelled of casseroles and fresh-baked bread, of community and care. Unknown to her, at that very moment, a private jet was touching down at the small regional airport just outside town. But in her apartment, Alana was focused on the present, on the unexpected blessing of discovering that sometimes life's hardest moments could reveal the quiet strength of ordinary women standing together. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Magnolia Ridge's quiet streets as Caleb Reed's rental car idled at a discreet distance from Alana's apartment complex. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. The modest two-story building looked exactly as his security team had described it: weathered red brick, window boxes filled with purple petunias, and a small covered entrance. Through the windshield, Caleb watched residents come and go, a young mother wrestling with grocery bags, an elderly man walking his dog. The simple, peaceful scene made his throat tight. This was the kind of normal life he'd wanted to protect Alana from losing. Instead, his absence had left her to face humiliation alone. "Sir." His security chief's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Area's secure. No media presence detected." Caleb touched the device. "Stay back. I need to do this myself." He stepped out of the car, his Italian leather shoes feeling out of place on the cracked sidewalk. The late afternoon heat pressed against his suit jacket, but he barely noticed. His focus remained fixed on the second-floor window, where a lamp had just flickered to life. Moving closer, he positioned himself in the shadow of a large oak tree. From here, he could see more details: the way her curtains stirred in the breeze, the small peace lily on the windowsill. Signs of the quiet life she'd built without him. His heart hammered against his ribs. For all his business acumen, all his strategic brilliance, he felt utterly unprepared. Fear crept through his chest, not the familiar tension of corporate takeovers or security threats, but something deeper. The fear of seeing hurt in her eyes, of discovering he'd broken something too precious to repair. As twilight settled over the town, more lights came on in her apartment. Through the thin curtains, he caught a glimpse of movement, her familiar silhouette passing by the window. His breath caught. Even in shadow, she moved with the same grace he remembered. "Just do it," he muttered to himself, squaring his shoulders. He'd faced hostile boards and corporate raiders without flinching. Yet here he stood, terrified of a gentle woman who'd never spoken a harsh word to him. The walk to her door felt endless. Each step up the metal staircase echoed in the growing darkness. At her threshold, Caleb paused, straightening his tie, a nervous habit he thought he'd overcome years ago. The doormat beneath his feet read, "Welcome," in faded letters. His knock sounded too loud in the evening quiet. 3 firm raps that seemed to echo down the walkway. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he heard soft footsteps approaching. The door opened, and time seemed to stop. Alana stood before him, one hand still on the doorknob. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. But it was her eyes that held him, those same warm brown eyes that had once looked at him with such trust. He watched emotions flash across her face like lightning. Shock, fear, something deeper he couldn't name. Her free hand moved instinctively to her middle, a gesture that made his chest ache. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic and the soft chirping of evening crickets. In that suspended moment, years of distance and carefully maintained silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it again. All his prepared speeches evaporated. He could only stand there, watching her face, waiting. Finally, Alana moved. Without a word, she stepped back, opening the door wider. The simple gesture, offering him entrance when she had every right to slam the door in his face, humbled him completely. He stepped across the threshold, bringing with him all, their unspoken words, all their shared regrets. The door closed behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo with finality. Inside, a small table lamp cast warm light across a modest living room. A quilt draped over the back of a well-worn couch. Books stacked neatly on a coffee table. The space felt lived in, peaceful. Everything his sterile penthouse wasn't. They stood facing each other in her small entryway, close enough to touch, but separated by years of silence. The air between them felt charged with all the things they'd never said, all the choices that had led them to this moment. Alana's hand remained protectively curved over her middle, the gesture both a shield and a reminder. Her chin lifted slightly, that quiet dignity he remembered so well, even in the face of uncertainty. The moment stretched on, delicate as spun glass. Through her window, the last rays of sunset painted the walls in shades of gold and purple. Time seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next between these two people who had once meant everything to each other. The soft click of Alana's apartment door echoed in the silence as she closed it behind Caleb. The familiar scent of lavender air freshener filled the small living room, where a worn but comfortable sofa faced a modest television. Neither of them moved to sit. Caleb stood tall in his tailored suit, looking out of place among her second-hand furniture and carefully tended houseplants. His presence seemed to shrink the already small space. The silence stretched between them like a living thing until Alana cleared her throat. "Why are you here, Caleb?" Her voice was quiet but steady. He turned to face her fully, his shoulders tight with tension. "I saw the video." A muscle worked in his jaw. "I should have been here. Should have protected you." "You can't protect someone you pushed away," Alana said, wrapping her arms around herself. Caleb's carefully maintained control cracked. "I was wrong," he said, the words rushing out. "I told myself keeping you at a distance was keeping you safe. But I was scared. The threats, the corporate espionage, the constant surveillance, I thought I was doing the right thing." He ran a hand over his face. "I made excuses. I have no right to ask for forgiveness. But I am sorry, Alana. More sorry than I can say." Alana moved to perch on the arm of her sofa, one hand unconsciously drifting to her belly. "You weren't entirely wrong about the danger," she said softly. "That's partly why I left. When I found out I was pregnant..." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I couldn't imagine raising a child in that world of bodyguards and security protocols. Always looking over our shoulder, never knowing who to trust." Caleb's eyes fixed on her protective gesture. "How far along?" 13 weeks. The weight of those 2 words filled the room. Caleb took a step forward, then stopped himself. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the space beside her. Alana nodded, and he sat carefully on the sofa, maintaining a respectful distance. "I've spent months building walls and expanding security systems," he said, "but true protection isn't about keeping people out. It's about standing beside the ones you love, facing whatever comes together." Tears pricked at Alana's eyes. "I don't need grand gestures or promises of luxury, Caleb. This baby needs stability, peace, and parents who can look each other in the eye." "I understand that now." His voice was rough with emotion. Then, in a movement that surprised her, Caleb slid from the sofa to kneel on her worn carpet. He faced her belly, his usual CEO confidence replaced by something more vulnerable. "Little one," he said softly, "I'm your father. I know I'm late to this party, and I have a lot to make up for, but I promise you this. My protection comes with no strings attached. It's not about control or ownership. It's about making sure you and your mother can live your lives in peace, whatever that looks like." Alana's breath caught in her throat. This was a side of Caleb she'd glimpsed only rarely during their relationship. The man beneath the power suits and boardroom decisions. "Would you like some tea?" she asked, her voice slightly shaky. "I have that chamomile you used to like." A small smile touched his lips. "I'd like that." In her tiny kitchen, Alana moved through the familiar motions of preparing tea, aware of Caleb settling at her small round table. The gentle clink of mugs and the whistle of her kettle filled the silence. "Remember that little cafe in Chicago?" Caleb asked as she set his mug before him. "The one where we used to meet before work?" "Roses," Alana said, sitting across from him. "Best blueberry muffins in the city." "I haven't been back since you left." He wrapped his hands around the warm mug. Couldn't face it. They sat quietly, sipping tea and letting the tension ease from their shoulders. Through her kitchen window, Alana could see the moon rising over the neighboring buildings. It felt surreal, having Caleb here in her modest apartment, drinking tea from her mismatched mugs. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "That depends on you," Caleb replied. "I'm not here to disrupt your life or force changes you don't want, but I'd like to be present, for both of you, in whatever way you're comfortable with. Alana studied his face in the soft kitchen light. The sharp edges of his CEO mask had softened, revealing the man she'd fallen in love with before fame and fortune had complicated everything. "I need time," she said honestly. "This isn't just about us anymore." Caleb nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Time I can give. And Alana?" He leaned forward slightly. "No more running away from each other. Whatever comes, we face it together, even if that just means as parents who respect and support each other." The simple truth of his words settled over them as they finished their tea in companionable quiet. Outside, crickets chirped their evening song, and a neighbor's wind chimes tinkled softly in the breeze. It wasn't perfect, and many things remained uncertain, but for the first time in months, both Caleb and Alana felt the weight of secrets lifting from their shoulders. The morning sun had barely risen when Alana noticed the first news van pulling onto her quiet street. Through her kitchen window, she watched the white vehicle with satellite equipment park across from her apartment building. Her hands trembled as she set down her morning tea. "No, no, no," she whispered, backing away from the window. The peaceful moment from last night, sharing quiet conversation with Caleb over chamomile tea, felt like a distant dream. Her phone buzzed. A text from her neighbor. "Turn on Channel 4. With shaking fingers, Alana found the local morning show's live stream on her phone. Miles Turner's smug face filled the screen as he lounged in the radio station's chair, speaking into a microphone, with exaggerated concern. "I'm just worried about her, you know?" Miles's voice dripped with fake sincerity. "She's clearly going through something. The weight gain, the mood swings, hiding away from everyone. People deserve to know what's really going on with Alana Brooks." Bile rose in her throat. She clicked the video off, but not before seeing the comment section explode with speculation and cruel jokes. A soft knock made her jump. "Alana?" Caleb's voice came through the door. "I saw the vans." She let him in quickly, noting how his usual crisp suit looked slightly rumpled. He must have rushed over as soon as he saw the news. His eyes were dark with concern. "I've already called my security team," he said, pulling out his phone. "They can be here within the hour. We'll set up a proper perimeter, make sure no one—" "No." Alana's voice was quiet but firm. "I won't live like that." "Alana, please, let me help." Caleb stepped closer, his hands open in appeal. "These people are trained to be invisible. You won't even notice—" "I said no." She wrapped her arms around herself, one hand unconsciously protective over her belly. "I won't raise our child surrounded by guards and paranoia. I won't live in a cage, even a gilded one. That's why I left in the first place." Caleb's shoulders dropped. He looked out the window where 2 more news vans had appeared. "Then let me handle this another way." Throughout the day, more media gathered. Alana's phone filled with messages from concerned friends and nosy strangers who'd somehow found her number. She turned it off, grateful she could work remotely today. Caleb set up his laptop at her kitchen table, typing furiously between quiet phone calls. His presence both comforted and unsettled her. This powerful man who could command empires but couldn't stop small-town cruelty without making everything worse. As evening approached, Alana's neighbor brought over dinner, a casserole, and a warning that reporters were trying to interview everyone in the building. Caleb's jaw tightened at the news. "It's ready," he said softly, turning his laptop toward Alana. "My public statement. I want you to read it first." Alana leaned forward, scanning the carefully worded message. "As CEO of Reed Enterprises, I rarely comment on personal matters. However, recent events in Magnolia Ridge, Georgia, have highlighted a disturbing trend of public harassment and body shaming that demands attention. When we normalize cruelty for entertainment, we damage not just individuals, but our entire social fabric. I condemn these actions unequivocally and call for an end to this form of public bullying. Everyone deserves to live their life with dignity and respect, free from harassment. Reed Enterprises will be making a substantial donation to anti-bullying initiatives and organizations supporting mental health resources in communities affected by cyber harassment. Alana read it twice, noting what wasn't said. No mention of her name, no hint of their relationship or the pregnancy. Just a powerful man taking a moral stand. "Will this help?" she asked quietly. "It might make things worse before they get better," Caleb admitted. "My board won't like me involving the company in what they'll see as small-town drama. But it puts the focus on me instead of you, and it sends a message about power and responsibility." As if confirming his words, Caleb's phone immediately began buzzing with calls from board members after he posted the statement. He stepped onto Alana's small balcony to handle them, his voice low but firm as he defended his decision. Alana watched social media explode. Supporters praised Reed Enterprises for taking a stand against bullying. Critics questioned his involvement and motivation. Business news sites speculated about corporate implications. But gradually, she noticed something else. People were talking about the broader issue now, sharing their own stories of public shame and harassment. The cruel jokes about her were being drowned out by serious discussions about community responsibility. A text came through from one of the church ladies. "Proud of you, baby girl. Standing with dignity always shows the truth." Tears pricked at Alana's eyes. Outside her window, camera lights still glowed in the growing darkness. She could hear Caleb still on the phone, protecting her the only way she would let him. Not with guards and gates, but with truth and principle. She placed both hands over her growing baby bump, remembering her promise that cruelty would not define their life. Maybe this was how they would fight it, not by hiding, not by force, but by standing calmly in the light of truth and letting goodness speak louder than shame. The news vans stayed parked outside, their lights casting long shadows. Corporate phones kept ringing with demands for explanations. Somewhere in town, Miles was probably already planning his next radio appearance. But inside her small apartment, Alana felt something she hadn't expected. Not safety exactly, but strength. The kind that comes from facing fear with dignity and finding you're not standing alone. 2 days had passed since Caleb's public statement, and the morning sun streamed through the windows of his temporary office in Magnolia Ridge. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from board members and investors. The weight of corporate pressure felt heavier with each passing hour. Caleb loosened his tie, staring at the latest email from the board. His jaw tightened as he read their carefully worded warning. Recent public statements have caused significant concern among key stakeholders. Multiple investors are reconsidering their positions. The board strongly advises immediate damage control. He rubbed his temples, thinking of Alana in her small apartment just a few blocks away. The security team he'd stationed nearby reported everything was quiet, but the pressure was building. News vans still circled the neighborhood like vultures, hoping for a story. His phone rang again. Marcus Chen, his longest-serving board member. "Caleb, we've got problems," Marcus said without greeting. "Thompson Industries is threatening to pull their $100 million contract. They're saying the controversy is bad for their image." "Their image?" Caleb's voice was sharp. "I spoke out against public harassment. Since when is basic human decency controversial?" "Since it affected the bottom line," Marcus replied flatly. "Listen, you're not just Caleb Reed anymore. You're the face of Reed Enterprises. Every word you say impacts thousands of jobs, billions in contracts." Caleb paced the room, his reflection moving across the window glass. "So I'm supposed to stay silent while someone is publicly humiliated? That's not who I am." "No one's asking you to approve of harassment." Marcus said, "but getting personally involved in a small-town drama, it's beneath your position. The board needs you to issue a retraction, distance yourself from the situation." "No." Caleb's voice was firm. "That's not happening." The conversation grew heated, their voices rising. Neither man noticed the small figure of Alana passing by the office door, having come to bring Caleb some lunch. She paused, hearing the anger in his voice. "This isn't just about money," Marcus was saying. "Our Asian expansion depends on Thompson's distribution network. Years of work, thousands of jobs, all at risk because you couldn't stay out of a viral video controversy." Alana's hand trembled as she held the paper bag containing the sandwich she'd made. Through the crack in the door, she could see Caleb's tense shoulders, his free hand clenched into a fist. "I said no!" Caleb's voice boomed. "Find another way." The phone call ended abruptly. Caleb turned and saw Alana standing there, her face pale. The paper bag dropped from her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered, backing away. "I didn't mean to. Alana, wait!" But she was already gone, hurrying down the hallway. That evening, Alana sat alone in her apartment, watching the sunset paint the walls orange. Her hands rested on her growing belly as tears slid down her cheeks. She could still hear Caleb's angry phone call, could still see the stress lined in his face. "I'm doing it again," she whispered to her unborn child. "Bringing chaos into people's lives." Caleb had taken a sleeping pill after dinner, exhausted from the day's battles. He slept deeply in the guest room of her apartment, unaware of Alana's movements in the quiet hours of night. With trembling hands, she packed a small overnight bag. Just the essentials, some clothes, her prenatal vitamins, the ultrasound picture she kept in her wallet. Her movements were careful, silent, each item chosen with purpose. At her small writing desk, Alana pulled out paper and pen. Tears splashed onto the page as she wrote, "Dear Caleb, your kindness these past days has meant more than I can say. You came when I needed help, stood up when others were cruel, but I can't let your whole life fall apart because of me. This baby deserves better than to be the reason their father loses everything he's built. I'm choosing distance again, not from fear this time, but from love. Our child deserves a father who can change the world, not one who loses his dreams trying to protect us. Please don't look for me. Please understand that sometimes love means letting go. Thank you for showing me the man you've become. I'll make sure our child knows that part of you." She folded the letter carefully, placing it on the kitchen counter where he would find it. Moving to the guest room door, she opened it slightly. Caleb slept peacefully, his face relaxed for the first time in days. "I'm sorry," she whispered, touching her belly. "Your daddy is a good man. Sometimes good men need to be protected from their own hearts." The pre-dawn air was cool as Alana slipped out of her apartment. Her small bag felt heavy with the weight of her decision. A cab waited at the corner. She'd called it earlier, careful to use cash instead of her phone. As she climbed in, she caught one last glimpse of her apartment windows. Somewhere inside, Caleb slept, unaware that she was choosing distance again. The cab pulled away from the curb, carrying her into the uncertain dawn. Her hands never left her belly as the familiar streets of Magnolia Ridge faded behind her. Each mile that passed felt like both escape and loss, protection and pain. The sky began to lighten, but Alana's tears fell in the darkness of the back seat, silent prayers mixing with quiet goodbyes. The cab merged onto the highway just as the first rays of sun touched the horizon. Alana closed her eyes, exhausted from a sleepless night of difficult choices. Her last thought before drifting off was of Caleb finding her note, hoping he would understand that sometimes love shows itself in leaving, not staying. The morning sun filtered through the apartment windows, casting long shadows across the empty living room. Caleb stirred on the couch where he'd fallen asleep after his late-night phone calls. Something felt wrong. The air held too much silence. "Alana?" His voice echoed against bare walls. He sat up quickly, his normally pristine suit wrinkled from sleep. The apartment felt hollow, like a held breath released too soon. His heart began to race as he moved from room to room, each empty space hitting him like a physical blow. On the kitchen table, a single piece of paper caught his eye. His hands trembled as he picked up Alana's handwritten note. The careful loops of her writing blurred before his eyes. "Dear Caleb, thank you for trying to make things right, but I won't be the reason your life falls apart. Our baby deserves better than to be blamed for ruining their father's success. Sometimes love means letting go. Please forgive me." The paper crumpled in his grip. For the first time in years, Caleb felt real fear. Not the calculated risk assessment he was used to, but raw, desperate terror. He'd lost her once through careful planning. Now he was losing her again through careless pride. He grabbed his phone, fingers clumsy as he dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. Of course. His mind raced through possibilities, bus stations, train depots, friends' houses. Then he remembered yesterday morning how she'd mentioned finding peace at New Hope Fellowship. Caleb ran to his car, not bothering to fix his appearance. The streets of Magnolia Ridge were just coming alive, shop owners sweeping their sidewalks, early morning joggers nodding hello. None of them knew his world was falling apart again. He spotted New Hope Fellowship's white steeple rising above the oak trees. The parking lot was empty except for one familiar car, Alana's old blue sedan. His breath caught in his throat. The heavy wooden doors creaked as he entered the sanctuary. Morning light streamed through stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across empty pews. And there, in the front row, sat Alana. Her shoulders were curved forward, hands clasped in prayer. Caleb's footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor as he walked down the center aisle. He saw her stiffen, but she didn't turn around. When he reached her pew, he didn't sit. Instead, he knelt on the floor beside her. "I've been afraid my whole life," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. Afraid of losing control, afraid of showing weakness, afraid of loving too much. He swallowed hard. "But I've never been as scared as I was this morning, finding you gone." Alana kept her eyes forward, but tears slid down her cheeks. "Your whole empire is at risk because of me, because of us. Let it fall." The words came out stronger than he expected. "All of it. The money, the power, the contracts. None of it matters if I lose you both again." "You don't mean that?" she whispered. "I do." He reached for her hand, relief flooding through him when she didn't pull away. "I thought I could protect you with wealth and distance, but I was wrong. What we need, what our child needs, is faith. The kind you have, the kind that brings you here to pray instead of running away." A soft creaking sound made them both look up. The early morning prayer group had begun to arrive, elderly members of the congregation who gathered daily before sunrise. Instead of interrupting or leaving, they silently took seats in the back pews, bowing their heads in prayer. "These people," Alana said softly, gesturing to the praying congregation, "they don't care about stock prices or corporate mergers. When that video went viral, they brought me casseroles and prayer cards. They reminded me what real community feels like." Caleb looked at the gathered faithful, their silver heads bowed in quiet support. No phones, no cameras, no agendas. Just pure hearts offering silent strength to someone in pain. "I've been trying to build walls," he admitted, "when what we really need is this, a foundation of faith and love." He squeezed her hand gently. I can't promise the world won't be cruel sometimes, but I can promise to face it with you, not from a distance, to trust in something bigger than my bank account or my business strategy." One of the elderly women began to hum softly, an old hymn about amazing grace. Others joined in, their gentle voices filling the sanctuary with harmony. Alana's free hand moved to her stomach, where their child grew beneath her heart. "I'm still scared," she confessed. "Me too," Caleb said honestly. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared together is better than being brave alone." The morning light strengthened, sending shafts of colored light dancing across their joined hands. Behind them, the quiet hymn continued, a reminder that they weren't truly alone. Faith, family, and community surrounded them in this sacred space, offering something no amount of money could buy: hope. The afternoon sun filtered through the stained glass windows of New Hope Fellowship, casting colorful patterns across the worn wooden floors of the church hall. Alana sat beside Caleb on one of the well-loved couches, both of them staring at the small television mounted on the wall. The elderly church members had wheeled in the TV stand when news started breaking across local channels. "Breaking news from the viral video controversy that has gripped our community," the reporter announced, her voice filling the quiet hall. "New evidence has emerged regarding Miles Turner's recent actions." Alana's hands trembled slightly in her lap. Without thinking, Caleb reached over and steadied them with his own. The simple touch anchored them both. On screen, screenshots of text messages filled the display. The reporter continued. "Former co-worker Sarah Martinez has released a series of messages exchanged with Mr. Turner in the weeks leading up to the incident. The messages appeared one by one, each more damning than the last. Miles' words glowed harsh and clear. "Watch me take her down a notch. She thinks she's too good for this town now. Everyone's going to see what a joke she is." Alana drew in a sharp breath. Beside her, Mrs. Jenkins, one of the church elders, clicked her tongue in disapproval. "That boy always did have a mean streak," she muttered, shaking her head. The reporter's voice grew serious. "These messages suggest Mr. Turner's actions were premeditated, driven by personal resentment rather than random occurrence. Sarah Martinez has provided the following statement." The screen cut to Sarah, a young woman with kind eyes and a determined expression. "I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Miles has been bitter ever since Alana moved forward with her life. He's been planning to humiliate her for weeks. What he did wasn't just cruel, it was calculated." More church members had gathered in the hall now, forming a protective circle around Alana and Caleb. Someone brought cups of sweet tea. Another placed a gentle hand on Alana's shoulder. "Additionally," the reporter continued, "multiple witnesses have come forward describing Mr. Turner's history of similar behavior toward other community members." The story kept unfolding, piece by piece. Former girlfriends speaking up about Miles's pattern of public humiliation. Old classmates sharing stories of bullying. The truth cascaded out like a cleansing rain, washing away the mud of lies. Alana sat very still, watching it all unfold. Her face showed no triumph, only a quiet sadness for the hurt that lived inside someone who would choose cruelty over kindness. "You okay?" Caleb asked softly, his thumb tracing small circles on her hand. She nodded slowly. "I just never wanted any of this. Not the humiliation, not the revenge. I just wanted peace." Caleb watched the screen, where Miles' carefully constructed narrative was crumbling in real time. The man who had tried to shame Alana now stood exposed, not as a truth-teller, but as someone wrestling with his own demons. "Sometimes," Mrs. Jenkins said from her perch nearby, "the Lord has ways of bringing truth to light that we never expect." The news coverage continued, showing clips of community members speaking up in Alana's defense. The owner of the local bakery described how Alana volunteered at food drives. A teacher shared stories of her tutoring struggling students. The narrative was shifting, not through power or money, but through simple truth. Caleb felt something shift inside him too. He'd spent years building walls to protect his empire, using power to shield what mattered. But here, in this humble church hall, he watched as genuine truth dismantled lies more effectively than any corporate strategy ever could. "I need to speak up," he said quietly. Alana turned to look at him, question in her eyes. "Not to defend the company," he clarified. "Not to protect stock prices or contracts. But because I need to own my part in all of this, because staying silent when I should have stood beside you, that was wrong." One of the church deacons, Mr. Peterson, leaned forward in his chair. "Young man, there's power in honest words spoken from the heart." Caleb nodded, his decision crystallizing. "I've been trying to protect everything with power and distance, but maybe real protection comes from standing in the truth, whatever it costs." The afternoon light shifted, sending new patterns dancing across the floor. Church members moved quietly around them, bringing more tea, offering silent support. The news continued playing, but Caleb barely heard it now. His mind was already forming the words he needed to say, not as a CEO defending his empire, but as a man claiming responsibility for his choices. Alana squeezed his hand. "You don't have to do this. The truth is already coming out." "Yes, I do," he replied softly. "Not for the public, not for the company, but for us, for our child." His free hand moved instinctively towards her, belly then stopped, uncertain. Alana took his hand and placed it gently where their baby grew. The simple gesture held more power than any corporate declaration ever could. Around them, the church members pretended not to notice their intimate moment, busying themselves with straightening hymnals and adjusting flower arrangements. But their presence remained, steady and supportive, like a foundation beneath shaky ground. The news switched to showing social media responses, where hashtag Stand With Alana was trending. Messages of support poured in from across the country. But it wasn't the public vindication that moved Caleb. It was the quiet strength of the woman beside him, who had faced cruelty with dignity and chosen grace over bitterness. "I'll need to call a press conference," he said, his CEO brain automatically starting to plan. Mrs. Jenkins touched his shoulder. "Maybe start with prayer first, young man. Strategy can wait." Caleb paused, letting go of his usual need to control every detail. She was right. This wasn't about managing a crisis. It was about standing in truth. Simple, unvarnished truth. The afternoon light continued to shift, painting new patterns across the church hall floor. The news played on, but its urgency felt distant now. In this moment, surrounded by quiet strength and simple faith, Caleb understood that true power didn't come from controlling narratives or building walls. It came from the courage to stand in the light of truth, whatever that might cost. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Magnolia Ridge's main conference center, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Reporters filled every seat, their murmurs creating a steady hum of anticipation. Camera lights blinked red, broadcasting live across multiple networks. Back at her apartment, Alana sat cross-legged on her couch, her heart pounding as she watched the scene unfold on her small TV. She wrapped her arms protectively around her middle, drawing comfort from the gentle flutter of movement beneath her hands. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, Caleb Reed stepped onto the platform. The usual crisp suit was gone, replaced by a simple black button-down shirt and dark jeans. His shoulders were straight, but his expression held none of its usual calculated charm. Instead, his face showed something raw and honest that made Alana's breath catch. "Good morning," he began, his deep voice steady. "I'm here today not as the CEO of Reed Technologies, but as a man who needs to speak truth." He paused, his hands resting lightly on the podium. "In recent days, our community has witnessed acts of public cruelty that I can no longer stay silent about." Alana leaned forward, tears already gathering in her eyes. On screen, Caleb's gaze swept across the room with quiet authority. "First, I want to address the video that went viral last week. What we witnessed wasn't just body shaming, it was an act of targeted harassment against a woman, whose only crime was existing in public space. This behavior reflects the worst of who we can be as human beings." The room fell completely silent. Even the usual click of cameras seemed muted. "But I'm not here just to condemn cruelty." Caleb continued, "I'm here because I have my own truth to share." He took a deep breath, and Alana found herself holding hers. "The woman in that video is carrying my child." Gasps rippled through the audience. Phones immediately lit up, but Caleb raised his hand, commanding attention. "I chose silence once, believing it would protect those I love. I was wrong. My silence only gave power to those who would cause harm." His voice grew stronger, more passionate. "Today, I'm choosing to stand up, not just as a business leader, but as a father." In her apartment, Alana pressed her hand to her mouth, tears flowing freely now. She watched as Caleb's professional mask melted away completely, revealing the man she'd first fallen in love with. To any company threatening to pull their contracts because I dare to acknowledge my child and stand against public harassment, go ahead. My family's dignity is worth more than your dollars. His words rang with quiet conviction. And to those who think wealth or position gives them the right to mock, shame, or harm others, you're wrong. Every person deserves to walk through their day without fear of humiliation. The reporter's hands shot up, but Caleb wasn't finished. His voice softened, becoming almost gentle. "To the mother of my child, your strength has taught me what real courage looks like. You've shown me that true protection isn't about hiding or running. It's about standing firm in your truth and dignity." Alana's tears fell faster now, but they weren't tears of shame or fear. For the first time in months, she felt something like pride unfurling in her chest. Caleb straightened, his expression both tender and fierce. "I won't be taking questions about private matters. My child deserves to enter this world surrounded by love, not speculation. But I will say this. I'm done letting fear dictate my choices. I'm done watching cruelty go unchallenged." As he spoke, notifications began popping up on Alana's phone. Breaking news alerts announced major sponsors pulling their support from Reed Technologies. The stock price started dropping. But on screen, Caleb stood unwavering. "Some of you will call this career suicide," he said with a slight smile. "I call it choosing what matters. Thank you for your time." He stepped away from the podium, ignoring the shouted questions and camera flashes. The broadcast cut to news anchors discussing the shocking announcement, but Alana barely heard them. She sat in her sunlit living room, one hand pressed to her heart, the other cradling her growing belly. Her phone buzzed with messages from the church ladies, all sending love and support. But it was a simple text from Caleb that made fresh tears spill. "No more hiding. You and our child deserve to walk in the light." She looked around her small apartment, really seeing it for the first time in days. The flowers from her neighbors still brightened the coffee table. Cards and notes of encouragement decorated her fridge. And now, finally, the weight of secrecy had lifted from her shoulders. Standing slowly, Alana walked to her window and pulled the curtains wide open, letting the morning sun stream in fully. She thought about all the days she'd spent trying to make herself smaller less visible, less present. But Caleb's words echoed in her mind. Every person deserves to walk through their day without fear. Her phone kept buzzing with news alerts, more sponsors pulling out, stock prices continuing to fall, but mixed in were thousands of supportive messages flooding social media, praising Caleb's stance against bullying and his courage in choosing family over fortune. Alana closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. When she opened them, again she caught her reflection in the window, no longer hunched or hiding, but standing tall, both hands resting proudly on her visible bump. For the first time since that awful day at the job fair, she felt truly, completely free. She reached for her phone and typed out a response to Caleb. "Thank you for choosing truth. We'll walk in the light together." The morning continued to unfold, full of breaking news and speculation, but Alana remained peaceful. She understood now that strength wasn't about hiding from storms, it was about having the courage to dance in the rain. And for the first time, she wasn't dancing alone. The late summer heat gradually gave way to autumn's gentle touch in Magnolia Ridge. Leaves began their slow dance from green to gold, painting the small southern town in warm hues that matched the transformation taking place in Alana Brooks's life. In her modest apartment's bathroom, Alana stood sideways before the mirror, no longer hiding her growing belly under loose clothing. At 16 weeks pregnant, the curve was becoming more pronounced. She ran her hand over the small bump, a smile playing at her lips. The morning sickness had finally subsided, replaced by a steady energy that made each day feel like a gift. "Ready?" Caleb's voice called from the living room. "Just a minute," she replied, smoothing her dress. Today marked their third prenatal appointment together. The ride to Dr. Martinez's office was comfortable, filled with the kind of ease that comes from shared purpose rather than forced conversation. Caleb drove carefully, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other holding Alana's. The morning sun painted everything in soft light. In the waiting room, other expectant mothers smiled at them, some recognizing Caleb but respectfully maintaining distance. The media storm had settled into occasional ripples, managed by Caleb's new communications team, one focused on authenticity over image. "Brooks?" the nurse called, leading them to an examination room decorated with colorful charts and pamphlets. Dr. Martinez entered with warm efficiency, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "How are we feeling today?" "Better," Alana answered honestly. "The nausea's gone, and I'm sleeping through the night now." The doctor nodded approvingly as she checked Alana's vital signs. "Your blood pressure is perfect. The baby's heartbeat is strong and steady." When the quick, rhythmic sound filled the room, Caleb's hand tightened around Alana's. It was a sound that never failed to humble him, no matter how many appointments they attended. After the appointment, they began a new routine, sharing lunch at Mary's Diner, a local restaurant where the owner, Miss Mary herself, always saved them a quiet booth in the back. "2 sweet teas and your usual?" the elderly waitress asked with a knowing smile. "Yes, please, Miss Betty," Alana replied. Over plates of golden fried chicken and fresh vegetables, they discussed the changes in their lives. Caleb had been spending more time in Magnolia Ridge, converting a local office space into a satellite headquarters for Reed Enterprises. "The board meeting went well yesterday," Caleb mentioned between bites. "We're implementing new ethical guidelines across all divisions, lost some traditional investors, but gained twice as many focused on social responsibility." Alana nodded, pride warming her chest. She'd watched him transform his company from one focused solely on profit to one that valued human dignity alongside success. The change hadn't been easy. Several board members had resigned in protest, but Caleb remained steady in his vision. Their afternoons often found them walking through Magnolia Ridge's historic district, where ancient oak trees draped with Spanish moss created natural canopies over the sidewalks. People who had once whispered and pointed now offered genuine smiles and respectful nods. One particularly beautiful evening, as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, they strolled through Heritage Park. The air was crisp with early autumn, carrying the scent of late-blooming jasmine. I started looking at houses, Caleb said quietly, his voice careful. Nothing too big, just something with a yard, maybe near the park. Alana considered this, appreciating how he never pushed, always let her set the pace. I'd like that. She replied softly. Somewhere our child can play safely. They stopped at a wooden bench overlooking the duck pond. The water reflected the sunset like liquid gold, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. Alana sat down, feeling peaceful in a way she hadn't for months. Then it happened. A flutter, like butterfly wings, then a distinct movement inside her belly. Alana gasped, her hand flying to the spot. "What's wrong?" Caleb asked, instantly alert. "Nothing's wrong," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "The baby, I just felt the baby move." Caleb knelt before her, his eyes wide with wonder. Alana took his hand and placed it where she'd felt the movement. They waited, barely breathing, until... there it was again. A tiny kick, as if their child was reaching out to say hello. Caleb's breath caught, and when Alana looked at his face, she saw tears tracking silently down his cheeks. In that moment, everything else fell away. The past hurts, the public scrutiny, the corporate politics. There was only this. Two parents feeling their child move for the first time, their hearts full of hope and wonder. "Thank you," Caleb whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "for letting me be here for this." Alana covered his hand with hers, their fingers intertwined over the place where their child grew stronger each day. The setting sun wrapped them in golden light, and somewhere nearby, a mockingbird began its evening song. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if emphasizing the moment. Alana laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed across the quiet park. It was a laugh Caleb hadn't heard since before he'd left her all those months ago, and hearing it now felt like a gift he'd never deserved but would spend his life trying to earn. They sat together until twilight settled over Magnolia Ridge, sharing the quiet miracle of their child's first movements. Other park visitors passed by, but none disturbed the peaceful tableau of the couple on the bench, their hands joined over the promise of new life. The transformation in their lives continued steadily, like the changing of seasons. Caleb's company released its new mission statement, emphasizing ethical business practices and community investment. The quarterly reports showed growth despite, or perhaps because of, the shift in priorities. More importantly, Caleb found himself sleeping better at night, his decisions guided by principles rather than just profits. Alana, too, bloomed in this season of change. She began volunteering at New Hope Fellowship's youth program, sharing her story with young women who needed to hear about dignity and resilience. The very public shame that had once threatened to break her had become a testimony of strength, touching lives in ways she never expected. Their evening walks became a cherished ritual, a time to share the day's events and dreams for the future. Sometimes they talked about names for the baby. Other times they walked in comfortable silence, their footsteps in sync on the ancient sidewalks of their small town. The baby's movements grew stronger and more frequent, each kick a reminder of the miracle they shared. These moments grounded them, offering perspective when corporate challenges arose or when occasional negative press threatened their peace. Their child's heartbeat became the rhythm they built their new life around, steady and strong, full of promise and possibility. A gentle breeze rustled through the autumn leaves outside Magnolia Ridge General Hospital as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Alana Brooks sat in the hospital bed, her hands resting on her full belly, feeling the familiar tightening that had been growing stronger since afternoon. The contractions were getting closer now, like waves washing over her every few minutes. "You're doing beautifully," Caleb Reed whispered, his usually commanding voice soft with concern and love. He sat beside her, one hand holding hers, the other gently wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. His tie was loosened, jacket discarded hours ago when they'd first arrived. Alana managed a small smile between breaths. "I never thought we'd be here like this," she said softly. Together. The room was peaceful, dimly lit with soft lamps that cast a warm glow. Outside in the hallway, they could hear the quiet murmur of voices. The women from New Hope Fellowship had begun to gather, bringing with them the comfort of community and faith. Another contraction built, stronger this time. Alana squeezed Caleb's hand, her breathing becoming more focused. Without hesitation, Caleb began to pray, his deep voice steady and sure. "Lord, we ask for your strength and protection. Be with Alana and our child in this moment." The sound of his prayer blended with Alana's measured breaths, creating a rhythm that helped her through the pain. As the contraction eased, the door opened quietly, and Miss Martha, the eldest of the church ladies, poked her head in. "We brought some things from home," she said, entering with an armful of handmade quilts. Behind her, other church women followed, carrying more blankets and wearing gentle smiles. They moved quietly around the room, spreading warmth and comfort like they'd done for generations of mothers before. "And we thought you might want some music," Miss Martha added, as soft voices began to hum "Amazing Grace" in perfect harmony. The familiar melody filled the room, providing a peaceful backdrop to the sacred work of bringing new life into the world. Hours passed this way, prayers and hymns, quiet encouragement and steady support. The medical staff moved in and out efficiently, respecting the intimate atmosphere that had been created. Dr. Williams, who had been Alana's doctor throughout her pregnancy, checked her progress regularly with a kind smile. "You're almost there," she announced around midnight. "The baby's in perfect position." Alana nodded, gathering her strength. The contractions were almost constant now, each one more intense than the last. Caleb hadn't left her side once, his presence a steady anchor. When the pain peaked, he would pray, his voice never wavering, even as tears gathered in his eyes. "Our Father, who art in heaven." The church ladies' voices would join in, creating a protective circle of faith and love around the laboring mother. Their presence reminded Alana of all the support she'd received over the past months, the meals delivered, the prayers offered, the quiet understanding when things got hard. "I can feel the head," Dr. Williams announced calmly. "When you're ready, Alana, give me a good push." Alana gathered her courage, squeezing Caleb's hand. The hymns grew softer but didn't stop, creating a peaceful backdrop as she began to push. Caleb's prayers became whispered words of encouragement. "You're so strong, Alana, so strong." With each push, Alana felt closer to meeting their child. The pain was intense, but different now, purposeful, productive. The room seemed to hold its breath between her efforts, the only sounds being her breathing and the gentle hymns. "One more big push," Dr. Williams encouraged. "Your baby's almost here." Alana took a deep breath, feeling Caleb's support and the prayers of the women around her. With all her remaining strength, she pushed, and suddenly the room filled with the strong, healthy cry of a newborn. "It's a boy!" Dr. Williams announced joyfully, placing the squirming infant on Alana's chest. The baby's cries softened as he felt his mother's, Warmth. Alana looked down at their son in wonder, counting tiny fingers and toes, memorizing every perfect feature. Caleb leaned close, one hand gently touching their son's dark curls, tears flowing freely now. "He's beautiful," Caleb whispered, his voice thick with emotion, just like his mama. The church ladies had stopped singing and were quietly wiping tears, watching the new family with joy. Miss Martha stepped forward with one of the softest blankets, helping to wrap the baby snugly. "Welcome to the world, little one," she said softly. "You are so loved." The baby opened his eyes, dark and alert, seeming to take in everything around him. His tiny hand wrapped around Caleb's finger with surprising strength, causing his father to laugh softly. "What's his name?" one of the church ladies asked gently. Alana and Caleb exchanged a look, sharing a smile. They had chosen names months ago, during quiet evening talks and morning prayers. "David," Alana announced softly. "David James." "Reed." "After King David," Caleb explained, his voice full of pride and wonder. "A man after God's own heart." The name seemed to settle over the room like a blessing. Outside, the night was deep and peaceful, stars twinkling in the clear Georgia sky. Inside, the atmosphere was one of pure joy. Not a hint of the scandal that had once threatened to overshadow this moment. This was simply a family welcoming their child, surrounded by love and community. David yawned, his little face scrunching up before relaxing into sleep. Alana held him close, feeling the perfect weight of him in her arms. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Alana, the other hand still gentle on their son's head. The church ladies began to gather their things, preparing to give the new family some privacy. Before leaving, they joined hands around the bed, and Miss Martha offered one final prayer of thanksgiving. Their voices blended in peaceful harmony. "Thank you, Lord, for this precious gift of life. Thank you for bringing this family together in your perfect timing. Watch over them and guide them as they begin this new chapter." The prayer continued, but Alana was lost in the moment, watching her son sleep. Everything felt right. The weight of David in her arms, Caleb's steady presence beside her, the love and support that filled the room. This wasn't an ending marked by scandal or shame, but a beginning blessed with hope and renewal. The machines beeped softly, monitoring mother and baby's strong, vital signs. Outside, the night continued peaceful and clear, stars twinkling like promises in the Georgia sky. Inside room 312 of Magnolia Ridge General Hospital, a family that had found its way through trials and trust was complete at last. The late afternoon sun cast golden rays through the ancient oak trees surrounding New Hope Fellowship's garden. White folding chairs dotted the lawn in intimate clusters, while strings of simple white lights hung between wooden posts waiting for dusk. The spring breeze carried the sweet scent of magnolia blossoms and fresh-cut grass. 3-week-old Noah Reed slept peacefully in his father's arms, tiny fingers curled around Caleb's thumb. The baby wore a soft white cotton onesie, a gift from the church ladies who had become like family. Caleb stood tall but relaxed, his usual power suits replaced by a light blue button-down shirt and khakis. His eyes never left his son's face, memorizing every perfect detail. Alana sat nearby in a wooden rocking chair, her flowing yellow sundress catching the light. Her face glowed with quiet joy as she watched her two loves together. The past months of worry had melted away, replaced by a deep peace that showed in her gentle smile and steady gaze. "He has your nose," whispered Mrs. Jenkins, one of the church elders, as she paused to admire the baby. Her weathered hand patted Caleb's shoulder with grandmotherly affection. "But his mama's sweet spirit," Caleb replied softly, careful not to wake Noah. His voice carried a tenderness that would have shocked his corporate board members. The gathering was small, just 30 or so people from the church community who had surrounded them with love when cameras and criticism threatened to overwhelm. No press badges or microphones in sight. Only soft conversation and occasional laughter floated across the garden. Pastor Williams stood near the refreshment table, his kind face beaming as he watched his congregation. Simple punch and cookies served on borrowed church plates spoke of home and belonging more than any fancy catering ever could. "Remember when you first came to sit in our sanctuary?" Mrs. Thomas asked Alana, settling into a chair beside her. "Lord, you looked so tired and worried." Alana reached over to squeeze the older woman's hand. "I'll never forget how you all just quietly sat with me. No questions, no judgment, just love. That's what family does, sugar." Mrs. Thomas replied. "And your family now, all 3 of you." Caleb walked over slowly, still cradling Noah. The baby stirred slightly but stayed asleep, one tiny fist pressed against his cheek. Standing near Alana's chair, Caleb addressed the small group of elders who had gathered close. "I need to thank you all," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "When I first came here, I thought I knew what strength was. I had built an empire, faced down threats, made billion-dollar decisions without blinking." He paused, looking down at his sleeping son. "But you showed me real strength isn't about power or control. It's about protection rooted in love." Several of the older women dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs as Caleb continued. "You taught me that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is kneel down and pray. That true leadership means serving others with humility." He smiled at Alana. "And that real love doesn't hide, it stands up and tells the truth." Noah chose that moment to wake, making soft baby sounds that drew loving chuckles from the group. Alana stood and gently took him from Caleb, settling him against her shoulder with practiced ease. "Would you like to lead us in prayer, dear?" Pastor Williams asked Alana. The group naturally formed a circle, joining hands. Alana looked around at these faces she had come to love. Mrs. Jenkins, who brought her soup during morning sickness, Mr. Thomas, who fixed her leaky faucet without being asked, young Sarah, who left encouraging Bible verses in her mailbox. Her eyes met Caleb's, seeing in them the same gratitude that filled her heart. "Dear Heavenly Father," she began softly, her voice steady and sure, "we thank you for turning what could have been public shame into such private blessing. Thank you for showing us that faith can build bridges where fear would build walls. Thank you for this community that demonstrates your love in action every day." Gentle amens punctuated her words as she continued. "Thank you for teaching us that dignity doesn't mean never falling. It means getting back up and walking in truth. And most of all, thank you for this precious new life that reminds us every day that hope is stronger than hatred, and love is stronger than fear." Amen. The group echoed warmly. As if in agreement, Noah cooed and reached out toward one of the hanging lights that had just flickered on in the deepening dusk. The evening settled softly around them as people began sharing dessert and stories. Children played quiet games on the lawn while their parents talked. No one checked phones or watched the time. This wasn't a networking event or photo opportunity. It was simply family being family. Caleb wrapped one arm around Alana's waist as they stood together, watching Noah charm yet another church grandmother. The baby's laughter rang out, pure and sweet in the evening air. "Look at what God did," Mrs. Jenkins said, coming to stand beside them. "Took all that ugliness and turned it into such beauty." She gestured to the peaceful scene around them, the lights twinkling like stars, the comfortable fellowship, the absolute absence of cameras or controversy. Alana leaned her head against Caleb's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "He really did," she agreed softly. Their path hadn't been easy, but standing here now, surrounded by genuine love and support, their son safe and thriving, she knew every step had led them exactly where they needed to be. The gathering continued as the stars began appearing overhead, each moment a quiet celebration of faith, dignity, and truth. Not as headlines or talking points, but as lived reality, shaped by prayer, strengthened by community, and rooted in love that was strong enough to stand in the light. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.